How's it going?
Good, good. So, do you have an affirmative case on this topic? Like contentions, like ready to go? Like you know your definition that you have is the right one, and you're going to
Yeah.
prove it to me. Is that kind of
Well, so
how far you went with this, or what were you thinking?
I
Yeah.
have my definition. I made a few notes on reasons for thinking it's better than the other one, or at least something like it is. I can go over that, or I can let you try to go the other route, and you explain to me why you don't like mine. Either way is good.
I'll let you start because I do have questions for you, but I'll
Yeah.
at least let you explain to everybody what your position is on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
For sure. And I didn't plan this out to be, I mean, I knew we were calling it a debate, but I did not plan on it being, yeah, anyways, anything too formal. So, yeah, I'll go ahead and I just put out my definition today, made it available for anybody that wanted to see. And the definition itself is as simple as veganism is a philosophy that seeks to extend moral consideration to non human animals based on sentience. And the reason that I feel comfortable with it being as vague as it is, there's a handful, and part of it I make a note here where I talk about how veganism has to be on a spectrum of sorts. We view it as a diet, which of course it even originated that way because it used to be vegetarian and then they've branched off to be vegan. So like the word comes from referring to diet. The reason I think most people feel good about it not being just a diet and the reason it's good to look at other cases is because there's so many things we can do harmful to animals that would not be diet related. I don't know why I'm rambling to point that out because that's not anything you would dispute.
of course.
So, I think
So,
it's
so
on.
I guess
Yeah.
my question would be
Mhm.
for that definition, why do you feel like we need to move away from the one that the vegan society provides?
Gotcha. Okay. So when I was making the definition, I had remembered the Vegan Society one wrong, and I actually find the Vegan Society one to be pretty close to mine. Actually, I didn't realize they had the word Sikhs in there, so I thought I created that. Um, which, in a sense, is like mine. So the Vegan Society one, even though people they focus on what's not allowed and the possible and practicable part of it, the definition itself states that it's a philosophy and a way of living that seeks to exclude, so on and so forth. So by their definition, I feel comfortable calling that part the same as mine. So no matter what you end up doing, you could still subscribe to the philosophy. So in that sense, I'm good with theirs. What I don't like is I don't think the added details are important. Anything like, let's see, all forms of exploitation, cruelty. Like, I don't think those details are important because you don't need to explain what's happening as long as you're stating what's the basic idea of what's not allowed. So if you're extending the moral consideration, then you don't need to go into the detail of, you can say exploitation, but then that wouldn't include randomly setting up bombs that are going to explode and kill something that you're not exploiting. Might as well just cover it in one go. When you point out cruelty to animals for food, clothing, and other purposes, I made a note underneath mine involving that, but I don't think that needs to be in a definition because we're talking about what we're doing for the animals, and so those details don't matter. But the biggest beef, I would say, the biggest mock beef I have with the Vegan Society definition is probably the possible and practical, because I think one of the biggest problems with that, not only those words might have meant something different back in the day, but as far as looking at the definitions, and you might feel differently than I do, they basically mean the same thing. It basically is just saying if it's possible, and I don't know what possible would mean because a lot of vegans would probably debate this and say like a COVID vaccine, if you want a COVID vaccine, which has egg product in it, they would say like COVID's so drastic, you go ahead and do it. But it's possible to not do it. I don't know if, as far as you know, with the word practicable, which seems synonymous with possible, it's practicable to also not get a COVID vaccine. So, yeah.
Okay, so first I will just say that I do think those two words, practical and practicable, are fundamentally different, and I will explain once I start getting into my case.
Did you say practical
exactly
or
what those
possible?
mean. So the difference between practical and practicable.
No, those are
so
very
between,
different. I wasn't sure if you were saying
Oh, okay, okay.
possible and practicable.
Oh, okay. So in your case, you're saying that those two words are very similar and basically they're not necessary then?
Yeah,
Or you're not.
so the Vegan Society definition says exclude as far as possible and practicable, and anywhere I could find any form of definition, whether it's Oxford Dictionary or Merriam-Webster's, they are synonymous. Those two words essentially mean the same thing. I don't know if we have a case of in the 50s. Actually, those were added in 88. So I don't know if in the 80s, practicable was a more popular word that was used to mean something slightly different.
Well, when
But
I looked it up, I got the impression that possible was if you can do it, and practicable was if you were able to do it successfully. And so, practicable. The reason it's close to practical is because it's like it's really asking you the question: are you able to put it into practice? And in order to be able to put it into practice, you have to be able to do it successfully, which means that it's not going to kill you. So basically, that's kind of how I understand that word. But
yeah,
like I said,
yeah.
when
Yeah, sorry to cut you off, but I was just reading the definition and it says capable of being put into practice or being done or accomplished. Um, Feasible, and then yeah, it also the synonym is possible as well. It does seem like there is a slight difference where possible just seems like it can be done, where this does have the word success or accomplishment in it.
Yeah,
Um,
and really,
yeah.
I think practicable is the stronger word there because
Mm-hmm.
obviously, if it's practicable, then it's also possible. So the
Yeah. This
possible
is
word may not actually be necessary, but I think that just kind of helps to give people context of what we mean by
yeah.
practicable.
So if
Um,
you look at something like I gave an example of, and I have a bazillion examples, but like the COVID vaccine or any vaccine, I should probably stop using that C word on a stream. But able to be done or put into practice successfully, is that is it practicable to not get the vaccine? Can you successfully exist without the vaccine? So I don't know.
well, I guess we have to be clear with our question. So if
Yeah.
you're asking, is it practicable to live in society without the vaccine?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you could do it,
Mm-hmm.
and you could do it successfully. That doesn't mean it's right, you know.
Yeah.
So like, so they're different questions. I
Mm-hmm.
guess. So to answer your question, yes, it is practicable, but that doesn't necessarily entail whether it's right or wrong. Just because
Gotcha.
you practically can doesn't that doesn't mean that word has anything to do with the moral obligation, so to speak. Um,
Hmm.
and I feel like that in the definition of veganism, what we're talking
Mm-hmm.
about is um, when we're talking about seeking to exclude, we're doing that with the qualifier that it's practicable to do. So somebody else
Mm-hmm.
in your same situation is also able to do it in practice without dying, essentially. So essentially, when I get into my case, we'll go through this T by T by T. I don't know
Yeah.
if I can share my screen with you, but I do
Mm-hmm.
have some stuff written that I'd like to share. Um,
Yeah, you
but
can.
if you have anything more on why we need a new definition, because I would like to convince you that we don't. I would like to just
Yeah.
basically when I bring my case up and I tell you like I'm going to make the case for veganism,
Mm-hmm.
which obviously I don't need to because you're already doing it. But basically, like,
Mm-hmm.
if I make the case to you, I think you'll understand why the definition is what it is.
Yeah.
And I think it's a very useful definition because when it comes to talking to people about veganism and having them understand what it's all about, I actually think like as I was reading through it, I was like, wow, when they came up with this, they really covered their bases. Like they
Mm-hmm.
were really watching out because you're going to run into several different types of arguments, and at some point, the argument is going to have nothing to do with veganism anymore. And so that's when we need to be able to recognize, like, hey, you're asking me an ethical question here, but it's not within the scope of whether or not it's vegan. So it's not. So that question no longer would apply. It's just simply an ethical question that's outside of the scope. And so that's why I like the definition as it is right now, is because that scope tends to basically point to exactly what it is that the word for veganism is pointing to, and that's the people who practice the philosophy, and everything that's entailed in that definition spells out what it is. And I think there's two parts to it. I feel like that last sentence there where it says in dietary terms it denotes, like, that's part two. That's like,
Yeah. Well, I would
like
say
if
even
Google
before then, can we agree that after the word animals and before for food and so on, that it can be left out? So I'm putting in chat here. I feel like this is all that's really needed. The exploitation of and cruelty to animals. Any details about clothing or food or any other purpose, which would add everything else. I feel like it's just a notation for what the main focus is. Extension promotes development, animal-free alternatives. You don't need to know that the alternatives are going to exist. They had no clue what was going to exist today. And then humans and environment, that's all bullshit, right? We're
Well,
basically
I don't think it is.
deciding.
I don't think it is.
Really?
And
Okay.
I'll explain. I'll explain why. I
Okay.
think both of those are relevant, even though they may not be the main focus. They're still relevant. And
Okay,
as
cool.
far as the part after where you say or all forms of exploitation and cruelty to animals for food, clothing, and any other purpose, and by extension, maybe you don't. Maybe you can put just like any purpose and just like call
Yeah.
it good. But
Okay.
basically, I think it's fine the way it is. Like when people
Okay,
read
well, here,
that,
let me throw in a couple of my thoughts off the top of my head. I mean, I probably have a handful of counters to the things you're going to say, but if you wanted to hear a little more of what I had, and then I'll let you just go into yours.
yep,
Okay, so a couple of my concerns were is the issue that it is on a spectrum. So the reason that I don't think it's fair or that it's best to start having cutoffs of, if you do these things, we call you vegan, but each individual doesn't have like, each individual gets to decide what they're calling practicable, where let's say 99% of vegans said the getting a vaccine doesn't count. Like who do you leave it up to? And like, I know many vegans that are as vegan as possible, but they eat a small amount of local organic honey or whatever. And there can be so many different little things that you can look at to figure out that it's on a spectrum. You got crop deaths and so on and so forth. So the spectrum is a big part for me of why I think I just like things being precise, and it can't be precise without. I mean, due to it being a spectrum. Okay, so that's one thing. The a second thing is not that I want it changed to fix vegan infighting, but I think there's a lot of cases of various vegans that have different ideas of definitions, where my definition fits almost all of them, but each other's definitions doesn't fit each other's. So there's this guy I know from Colombia, David C. Arnaz. I think he's pretty well known vegan activist. Anyways, he thinks that even with dead animals that it counts as exploiting. So like if somebody found feathers from a dead bird, Native Americans can't put feathers in their whatever. And roadkill, not that anybody really wants to eat roadkill, but for the philosophical side of things, he says that even if it dies of complete accident, getting hit by a car, that you're not vegan. If you even claim that roadkill's fine, you're not vegan. And so this idea of all these vegans going around telling people who is and who is not vegan based off ideas like that, I can't tell you the amount of people, very well-known people on YouTube that are vegans that have called me not vegan, and I've seen them call tons of people not vegan. This really nice guy named Cliff Grant has told me I'm not vegan like 5 times. And I don't consume any animal products. I don't purchase anything ever tested on an animal, and I advocate for veganism. And I'm probably the most vegan person I know. And so anyways, that's, I'll stop rambling about that, but that's one of my one concern I have that this definition alleviates. And then my third note I made here would point out that a lot of things depend on if people care about a health aspect of things. Oftentimes this comes in just with hypotheticals, but one concern I have is I don't know how you stand on this, but like for me, if humans were carnivores, I wouldn't just sacrifice my life the way vegan gains would. I would eat what little bit of animals I had to eat to survive. And so same thing would go for my health. So when the Vegan Society started and got put together, B12 didn't even exist yet, like what it was. Nobody knew what it was. Now we know, and even though there have been some issues with like pregnant women giving birth to many kids that were deficient in some issues, we now know that if you do it right, we have supplements and everything's fine. But if we had a hypothetical situation where B12 could not be gotten from a supplement, and you had to like consume a small amount of something, let's say somebody had to eat like 1 fish a month or something to get B12. Luckily, you can get it bivalves, but I'm just talking hypothetically. I think a definition should be able to cover anybody that would be vegan, that would be a person that would sacrifice their own health versus somebody that wouldn't. Because I wouldn't sacrifice my health, but I would very easily go the rest of my life never consuming an animal. But if I needed to for my own health, I would. And so if a definition kind of treats it as if health doesn't matter, I find that complicated. So anyways, I'll put it over to you.
Gotcha. Okay, so before I get to my case, I will just test this a little bit, right?
Yeah,
so
for sure.
I do want to cover. Oh, hold on. What was it? So this point about people calling each other not vegan because they're not vegan enough, right? So what I like about the current definition is that you can point to it and say, well, I'm vegan by definition. And that's the end of the story. I mean, see, the point of words is to be able to use them in such a way that they have very clear meaning. Because when you start to stray from the original meaning of the word, you really just start to lose what it is. Like with, somebody calling somebody not vegan, they have to be able to point to what part of the definition, are they not embodying as a vegan, or claiming to embody that they're actually not. What sort of problems are they demonstrating that would basically make them not vegan anymore? And in my opinion, if you're T for T, if you believe in not exploiting animals, not doing cruelty to animals, however you arrive there philosophically, if you have those two things, and you have those two, belief systems, and then you act within that, which has certain implications. For example, honey, that is exploitation, and because you are taking it from the bee, right? I mean, it's not ours to take. We're gaining an advantage from them, and so in that case, I would say, by definition, that's not veganism because it's not. It is exploitation. And that's not to say, if they don't eat any other animals, at all, like honey is the only thing, then what I would say about that is that that person has a lesser degree of moral imperative, which they are obligated to act on. So their imperative is not as like as much as a great type of imperative that would, you know, be like it's not signaling the same amount of harm, suffering, you know, the things that we value as somebody who's like truly non-vegan, you know, not consuming any animal. Like there's a much greater moral imperative for those people than there is for the people who eat honey. But that's still to say, by definition, they didn't meet veganism, like because they're still doing the exploitation part. But you can still look at that person and go, well, hey, they're way more ethical, right? Because we tend to confuse like veganism as the only ethical position that there is. And I think that's because it's the one with the greatest moral imperative, you know, that in our community, we're trying to get other people to see that and try to see their obligation, which actually I will ask you about that in a little bit. But the point is to basically be able to look at our community and go, okay, we're in the moral right. And that is what the position of veganism is really, you know, it's one aspect of moral right, because veganism doesn't talk about like, oh, you're not allowed to, I don't know, lie to somebody. I mean, say you just tell white lies because, you know, and you don't gain anything from it. It's not exploitation, you know, by the definition, but you tell white lies and like, then, you know, somebody believes your lies and then, you know, they start acting like a fool and they embarrass themselves. Like there's nothing vegan about that question, but there's still an ethical, you know, question there. Like, should you do that? Right. And you can still say, no, you shouldn't do that. And you can qualify that with that, whatever value you're appealing to, and then basically substantiate your moral reasoning, and then, you know, get them to act differently. And that's the great thing about humans is that, you know, we have this moral agency where we have a responsibility to look at our actions and determine whether they're right or wrong. And, you know, veganism is one way of doing that. It's definitely one that I would say it's a moral obligation that, you know, the humans on this planet ought to be following, as it is worded right now, because it already accounts for kind of some of the problems that you can, you know, come up with against the position. So with that said, there was just a couple questions I wanted to ask you just to make sure.
Do you prefer to ask those questions first, or would you like me to counter some of what you said?
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I not necessarily counter, but I have some questions that kind of like line up with what you said.
Yeah,
but,
if they line up, go ahead.
Yeah. So if bees, let's say hypothetically, bees made honey and they just left the honey and then they went and ate other things. They just eat, you know, they like hummingbirds. They just like eat the nectar or something from the plant or whatever. But they make this honey and leave it. Is the honey fine to eat if it's left?
I would say if they're not using it in any way, then yes, because at that stage, you're basically not gaining from them. You know, like you're not actually exploiting if they're not using it. Like, so in a hypothetical world, yes. But of course, in today's world, no, because they do eat it.
Gotcha.
So yeah.
And the exploiting is the fact that they made it, not the fact that they need it.
Well, I feel like the fact that they would normally go to eat it, whether or not they need to or they don't need to, like, you know, you can always put sugar or whatever and let them eat that. But if they normally eat it and you're taking it from them and then you're replacing it with something that you don't want, well, now you've gained from them and they basically lost. You know, I mean, maybe even if they don't lose, you're still gaining from them and they still would have eaten that. So you still took it away from them. You know, you still exerted some sort of force or control
Yeah.
over the situation to extract it.
I'm just trying to figure out how much of it is connected. I mean, how much of the exploitation is connected to the fact that they made it, and then also how much of a separate from exploitation, how much of a moral wrong is based on the fact that they made it. So let's say you had an almost identical insect that similar to bees needed to only consume one product, and it was something like honey, but they didn't make it themselves. It just exists in the world, and we could enjoy it, but we know that there's a limited amount, and this is a natural thing they go to. We do not need it for health whatsoever. We know it is absolutely unnecessary for us to eat. We don't need to call it bad for us. We don't need to call it good for us. We just, like, humans would never need this thing. But if we consume it, then we can just magically know that more of this insect would die. I don't think this would be exploitation, but would it be considered similarly wrong?
It depends, because if we're asking the question about whether or not something's right or wrong, we have to be able to first appeal to something, a value that we have, to be able to make the argument that it's right or wrong, and then also substantiate that with logic and reason and evidence. So,
Gotcha.
for
Okay,
example,
so if we understood, sorry to cut you off, but I just want to see if I can clear it up really quick. If we understood scientifically that this is what this animal needed, this insect that was sentient needed, and it's what it would consume. We observe them, we see that they don't eat anything else, and then we could just recognize anytime we take any, more of them die quicker. Then would it, if we did not need it, would it become immoral to take?
there's definitely a scale there. So, like, at a certain point, when you're impacting, that species to great degrees, where you're basically genociding the entire species, definitely it's immoral. You know what I mean? And then, uh, and that would be because they still, um, you know, what on some level they're here on this planet. If there's no reason for us to take it, why are we humans genociding a species just because we're taking the thing that they need?
Yeah.
And then if we don't genocide them, and we just take a little bit, and like 10 bees die, then it's like, I mean, what's the imperative there? I mean, what's my moral obligation to them? Because if we're looking at our actions as right or wrong, if I don't need it, then it's very hard for me to make a moral case that I'm justified in taking it. Like, if it's something that's like, I'm actually going to eat it, like a plant, and some other animal would have eaten that plant. Well, I need to survive too, so therefore it's morally justified. But as far as whether or not, is it ethical? On some of these gray cases, you can argue either way, and sometimes you can have multiple right answers.
Okay.
But other times it's very clear what the right answer is, such as in the case of veganism. So that's kind of what my answer to that would be.
Okay.
Did you have any other follow-ups on it?
Yeah. The main thing, and I'll just make this quick, and you don't even have to reply to this one, but just so you can know kind of where I'm coming from. Like with how quickly you said that the honey fits into the exploitation, and therefore not vegan if you consume any honey. I just feel like this is where the spectrum comes in, because if you have this other insect like the one I just described, or something even a little further away but not too far away, which is something like crop deaths, where now that's crops that we need to consume. So I agree with you, like we can protect our own crops and whatnot. But at some level, it becomes an issue where if we're using pesticides to grow more crops, or to be able to make more money off the crops or whatever, and we're killing off all these insects, and therefore the birds are eating the insects and killing off all these birds. When we start to look at it and break it down and figure out, okay, well, are we overeating these products, or are we consuming too many calories, considering the fact that it's killing something to get the calories? I don't mind if somebody wants to be overweight on their own, but if being overweight causes more deaths, then we kind of have an issue with something similar to these made up insects that I said that are like bees, and then we start having an issue where I think it's perfectly fine, like a beaver, to knock down a tree to build our own shelter. But at what point is our shelter so big that we clearly do not need it to be that big that too many things die that it becomes not justifiable? So I guess if anything, if you were to convince me that we need the current definition, I would want even more stuff added to the current definition to where it's not just exploiting and it's not just cruelty. Unless maybe we can just get to the point where we agree that what most vegans don't call cruelty, maybe me and you will call cruelty, which would be some of these examples I'm giving. So, anyways, yeah, go on.
Okay, so I think we will touch on those things as we get through my case, because I know you'll bring them back up as a rebuttal. Because I'll start getting into the crop deaths and stuff like that for you, but I'll kind of save that for the end. But sure. I did want to ask you a couple questions on your stuff here. So why did you strip away the way of living part from the definition? I did see that it's further down in your piece of or your page, but I'm curious as to why it's now just a philosophy.
Mostly because the spectrum.
Okay, so and by spectrum, is it safe for me to say that's like the gray area? Like the gray around the edges, that's like unclear whether this is vegan or not, kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's mostly referring to that, but I mean, you could fit in various different things. Like I would like to have somebody like Peter Singer in our group. He can sit with us. Even if he says something like, well, if we figure out the perfect amount of hectares to fit these chickens where there's all this grass, that consuming their egg, or if somebody has like a backyard chicken that they don't share the news that they have them, but they rescued them from someplace, and the chickens lay these eggs, and the chickens don't want to consume the eggs themselves because the nutrients or whatever, and then somebody consumes that egg. I would say there's always various things that some people would say are vegan or not vegan. So yeah, due to the spectrum, I find it complicated to say that there is a way of life that is detailed and necessary for why I think veganism should exist.
Okay. I'm going to hopefully prove you wrong when I get to my stuff. So
I'm hoping
I have more questions though. Yeah. So what do you think, or I'm sorry, why do you think that moral consideration is all that's needed to be vegan? Like, I guess you kind of answered that, because it sounded like, maybe with like Peter Singer, you want him to be included on it. But why is no longer a requirement not to consume animal-derived products vegan? Like, why are you now? Because by your definition, aren't you essentially saying like, all you have to do is extend the consideration? It doesn't actually matter, it does matter. You have to be able to justify it, but that's what you're saying is if you can justify it, then all of a sudden now you're no longer held to the obligation of not eating animals. Is that fair to say?
Yeah,
question?
so I was watching a Joey Carbstrong video today that I didn't like, but it's all right. The main thing is he pointed out that hopefully in the future when everybody goes vegan, the word vegan won't be needed anymore. Like that, like the idea of the philosophy won't be needed anymore. And I think a concern that seems to pop up is this idea that if you make the word kind of pointless, then what's the point? And I feel like the goal is to get the world to do this thing, and to have this philosophy, we want it to be something that's like that. I'm trying to figure out the best way to word it. So I wouldn't want to change the definition just to get more people to be good, just to get a good outcome. If changing the definition, I knew we would like instantly have less animals harmed and killed. Okay, well, maybe I'd do it. But I like to think that part of me would stand strong on not doing it for that reason. But a very important benefit I see with the definition being more like what I'm describing it as is I think what's holding back the possibility of taking care of animals is we have a wild amount of people that are probably somewhat empathetic to animals and would want huge change. And if they were with us long enough, working with us and talking with us and wanting pigs not to have their tails cut off and their teeth cut out, then they'll probably completely go 100% over. But we have this group that we are basically just saying, you got to be exactly like us, and even if you are exactly like us, we're gonna fight a bunch about it. But you have to be exactly like us, and if you're not in our group, and you don't get to talk with us about changing laws or anything. We're gonna keep our group as small as we can, unless you will do the perfect thing at the perfect moment. And to me, the idea of having a philosophy that's about extending moral consideration to animals and viewing animals as not just a resource, viewing animals as these things bleed and can suffer and can most likely want to keep existing, that anybody that agrees with this and wants to extend consideration to them, this is the philosophy for you. Now, I could make up a new word and call the philosophy that does this something else like bloop blop. But veganism is so much basically that already that I really just think it was an error in definition in early years. So, yeah, hopefully that answered it.
Yeah. So I guess my question to that is like, if we want to have people consider animals morally, then how is it that simply by getting them more involved with us and talking with us and actually, we stop the infighting because now we're no longer calling each other not vegans. How does that actually bring us closer to what I would say is the goal is to end animal agriculture? Would you agree with that?
Yeah. I think it would help tremendously. Well, so first of all, it would make us like, so I got a good friend on here that hops in all the time. Her name's Wendy, and I met her through this channel, and she was not vegan at all, but she was very like, she cared about animals and thought about being vegan. But she's never met a nice vegan, she says, until she met me. And anyway, so she was slowly trying a few things, and I set up a debate where I was going to have a vegan friend of mine debate her, and it was going to be a nice casual one. But it was like a week later, we had this set up, and she got in there, and she's like, "Oh, I'm actually vegan now." So we just had a fun talk because it didn't work out to be a debate. And then like a week later, she said that she was like 95% vegan because she decided as of now she wants to eat a little fish. But you probably know as well as I do that most vegans, especially the ones on the internet, would tear her apart and say that she's a carnist and she's no vegan. Get out of here. It doesn't matter that you've changed your entire way of living to cutting out almost all the animals you're consuming. If you eat a fish a week, you're a monster to me or whatever. That kind of idea that pushes people like Wendy away, who will eventually likely become full vegan, just like I'm sure Alex O'Connor will be full vegan again soon. This idea of pushing people away, I think clearly does not get us to our goal. And the idea of bringing people in, people that maybe reduce their consumption or they only buy stuff at like grass-fed, free-range stuff or whatever. If we're constantly working with them and talking to them, and we have all these meat eaters that are also on the fence and kind of curious about veganism showing up to protests that want to like end certain factory farm stuff, but they're in favor of having real like free range stuff, then the conversations that keep happening and them not thinking, oh, all vegans are assholes. I think that definitely does lead to a better world, especially when you add in the welfare stuff. I don't know if you've seen Dominion in a while, but I just watched the first like 20 minutes of it the other day because I was having a podcast where I was talking to somebody about it. But it's disturbing to see what's done to these animals, to see the mother pigs in this tiny cage, and the runts are just like slammed against the ground, and then the tails cut off, the teeth cut out. Everything that happens, that at least that I'm listing right now, should be illegal. Now, obviously, a lot of us think that it should be illegal to do, or at very least, we should all stop farming and killing animals. But while they're going to be killed, there should be limits of how many you can have in a certain area and how much sun they have to see and all this stuff. And if we had all these people working together that actually care when politicians come out and say, oh, these laws are going to go into place, then these things would change, making less suffering for the animals. But also, these people that fought with us for this change will constantly be talking with us and learning more and more. And people that came here just to fight for welfare will become vegans. And I'm gonna stop rambling, but that seems obvious to me that that would be the
So,
case.
so let me comment on that. I think, if you're somebody who's in office and you're a vegan, you have to vote on a bill that's like, hey, we're going to give these animals more welfare.
Mm-hmm.
I think you as a vegan would have an ethical obligation to make that bill, like vote for that bill. If you don't have, obviously, you're not going to be able to, in this case, ban it, right? You have to either vote for the bill or not vote for the bill. So you have an
Mm-hmm.
ethical obligation to vote for the bill as a vegan, and whether or not you're a vegan, you should still vote for that bill because it's welfare for animals. But basically, I think there's a difference here between what is ethical and what is moral. And I think that's an important distinction that we should probably make, because what tends to happen is, people maybe want to support ethical actions, but then they're not appealing to morality to be able to do it in a way where they are not hypocritical. Because that's, I think, where the real power comes in, is because we as humans have this moral capacity, moral agency, where we can look at an action as right, or we can look at it as wrong. And we have to appeal to our values and then substantiate that logically and reasonably. And if we're acting against our own morals, say, for example, somebody's still eating meat, they're going to psychologically try to justify it because they're
Yeah.
already doing it. And the thing is, so like, part of the other problem is when somebody wants to go to a protest and be like, no, the animal agriculture should end. Or maybe they don't even think that. Maybe they just think they want animals to like not suffer anymore. And so they come over to the vegan camp and they're saying that. But at the same time, they're still paying the industries that do this. And these industries are capitalistic. So they're going to try to do it the most efficient way, which is not going to be humane. And of course, laws are the only way that are going to get that passed for it to be more humane. But they're actively working against their own interests, their own moral values, by paying for these products, regardless of, wouldn't you say that's true? Wouldn't you say that by paying these industries, you're working against your own moral system, even if you believe that they should have just welfare and not even abolish it?
Are you referring to the people that would be not vegans yet that are fighting to change regulations? Or are you saying
People
I will be
who
putting money into
are
something?
paying for no people who are paying for animal products, who
Yeah,
would be
yeah.
included under this new definition of veganism,
Oh,
when
okay,
they
yeah, yeah.
go to protest, wouldn't they be undermining themselves and their own moral system, because they're still paying for the product? They're still paying a company that wants to do this as efficiently as possible, and also and therefore, however inhumane it is, it doesn't matter to them.
Yeah.
They're able to use that same money that the person gave them to
Hmm.
then turn around and lobby with it. Not to say that, in a hypothetical world you couldn't ban it, but like, I'm just saying right now that's the way it is. So what would your response be to that, I guess?
I'm not sure if I follow
The fact that they're paying for it.
the lobbying side, but if an
So
individual
okay.
that I was calling a vegan, that they were calling themselves a vegan, but they still ate some fish or something, and that they were using that money. Yeah, so I don't know if I know enough about lobbyists and how that all plays out to be able to answer a lobbyist question.
I'm just suggesting, if you're paying the company who's killing these animals,
Hmm.
isn't that still against what you're trying to stand for? And I'm talking about people who pay for the products and eat the meat and then
Yeah,
turn around and
Yeah,
try
exactly.
to do
So
some
I
welfare
don't pay
things.
the companies because I don't eat any meat, so I don't put anything in demand. But
Yeah,
somebody
not
that
you in particular.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
somebody that that say they wanted they thought they needed animal products to be healthy, so they are eating some grass fed, free range chicken and eggs or something. They want the mom and the baby. Um, the they would be putting the money in the areas where they would say, okay, this is they feel like it's ethically sourced, and then that wouldn't go counter to them also maybe fighting for regulations to change against factory farms. So
Sure, but there's no
I
boycott
might.
there.
What's that?
And the reason I say there's no boycott there. And the reason I say that's important is because, like, you go to a restaurant, you know, you want these animals to be humane, but the food you're going to get is not. I mean, unless they're advertising it, you're not going to get the
Yeah.
humane food the humane animal products. It's just going to be, you're going to be paying for it anyway.
Well, that's why you got
And
to hold people consistent. So if you're talking to somebody and they say like, "Oh, I'm not going to support factory farm anymore. I'm only going to do this free range stuff," and then you see them eating at McDonald's, then the person's lying to you. I mean, anybody can lie anyways. Your neighbor can tell you tomorrow they're vegan, but maybe they're not. So anybody can lie, but opening the doors for people to be part of the conversation seems reasonable to me.
the only problem with that, though, is that I think your definition encompasses almost literally everybody. Like, because you could ask
It
anybody on the
could.
street, like, do you think hitting a dog is wrong? And they would say yes. I mean, that's definitely a
Probably.
cultural thing. You can point at any animal abuse and basically get people to tell you, yeah, that's wrong. And then you'd say, hey, you're considering this morally, or I'm sorry, you're extending moral consideration. Hey, you're a vegan too,
Mhm.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
doesn't that seem a little bit too relaxed because it doesn't really hold them accountable,
Yeah,
to their
in
actions?
theory it seems relaxed. In practice, I don't think as much. So what if somebody would have to be curious, and then you'd keep having conversations with them. But obviously, if somebody was like, "Oh, you know what? I don't want to punch a dog, but other than that, I'm going to eat all the other meat and all the other things," then you could say like, "Okay, so you don't think you can like punch a pig or a cow, but you think you can kill them to eat them. Why do you think that's okay?" And then if they're smart enough to answer it right, hopefully they'll say because they think it's a healthy thing to eat. And then when they say that they think you need it for health, you can say, okay, so anything unhealthy you don't think it's okay to kill because then you're harming an animal and you're not even being healthy. So you're like you'd be eating these chicken nuggets and deep fried things and corn dogs, hot dogs, cake made from dairy. And if they're going to say that you shouldn't be able to punch a pig in the face just for fun, then there's no reasonable way that they can say you can eat these unhealthy things. And even Garland Farms, in that talk I had with Michael, I don't know if you watched that whole 3 hour thing, but Garland said that it
I
would
did.
be okay. He said it would be immoral to eat anything unhealthy because the harm it causes. He just happens to think crops cause more. But so yeah, and I think that that's a perfectly fine type of person to have under veganism. But nobody's just going to be under veganism for fun. They could do it right now if they wanted. Like the anti-vegans could just be like, "Oh, I'm a vegan," and they're not really. And so anybody that would say, "Oh, I'm a vegan because I care about dogs but no other animals," then it's either going to lead to sweet, you get a conversation with that person, and if they're just trolling, they're trolling, so they're out. But if somebody's like, honestly, if they are convinced 100% they need to eat animals to be healthy, but they're willing to say like they're not going to eat unhealthy stuff, or if they're going to say I eat unhealthy stuff, but it's because I'm addicted and I feel ashamed and I want to keep hanging out with fellow vegans to get over my addiction of. But honestly, if it wasn't for addiction, there probably the world would be vegan right now. But yeah.
So let me ask you this then. So to me, it sounds like if we had that definition, that we would have problems because we would kind of run into a situation where, we couldn't actually identify where people were vegan or not. Wouldn't that kind of give us a bigger problem of spectrum, so to speak? Like the spectrum that you were talking about earlier, wouldn't our spectrum now be like way massive? Because
Yeah, let's play it out. What? Okay, so if most vegans will say that veganism isn't a diet, right? And so when you go to a restaurant and you're looking for vegan food, it's not like, oh, this is this is a philosophical food. It's food that doesn't use animals. So even if some people that are under the vegan umbrella eat certain animals, if they're asking a restaurant what vegan food you have, they would find the vegan food and then they'd say, and also I eat fish, so I'm gonna eat this thing. So I think it would play out fine there. If somebody goes to the vegan camp out, that'd be great to have what we don't consider vegans now there. That that sounds wonderful to me. Where do you think it might play out that it would be wrong? And you could be right. The definition I put up today was different like 3 days ago, and I'm very open to change, and I like to talk to people about stuff, and I like your thoughts so far quite a bit. So
yeah, my real core of this is to basically say the definition you're providing doesn't actually have anything that's a moral obligation for the individual, because you're just describing it as a philosophy that seeks to extend moral consideration. And it's great and all when people consider animals, but like then when somebody's like your example of somebody using it for health, I eat one steak a month to be healthy. I can see in a hypothetical world where if you are a carnivorous person, so your talk with Vegan Gains on this, like if you're a carnivore and you have to eat meat, or even if you're not a carnivore, but you're like an omnivore and basically you're still required to eat meat, then the whole point of veganism is going out the window. Like it's basically, you can't, like you go back 100, 200 years when, they didn't have, well, maybe go further than that, when they didn't have grocery stores where you just pick what you wanted to buy and you really had to rely on, I don't know, your tribe or whatever. Like you don't have the option. It's not practicable for you to be vegan, right?
Yeah.
So,
hold on one sec. Can I cut you off and just counter something real quick? Sure. You pick a random number of how many vegans you think might exist, and it does not have to be accurate. Just pick any random number.
Let's just say 1 million.
Okay. So imagine there's exactly 1 million today. And then if tomorrow my definition goes into place, and let's ignore all the new added full-on vegans. Let's just say that there's 500,000 that are partially vegan and they eat some meat or whatever. The reason I don't think there's any problem, unless you're concerned that current vegans will go, oh, there's not a definition that makes me feel part of a cool in-group, I'm going to start eating meat. Unless you're concerned about that, there's no downside, because the vegans that are vegan that are all like, I'm not going to consume any animals. I think that's gross. I don't want to harm any. They're still not harming any. But then you have this new added benefit of the people that are harming a lot less, because we can actually have conversations with them. So sorry, you can go on, but that's what
so it sounds like you're saying that by having more people that are close enough to veganism that we include them in the group, we'll be able to bring them over the edge. But my question for you would be, when somebody stops being vegan, what do you think that main reason is?
When somebody stops being vegan, what's that main reason? Well, it depends on why they started being vegan. So I would say a lot of people probably get convinced that meat is good for them.
Okay.
Which is why if we have people,
they go. So health? Are you saying they leave for health reasons or something?
Probably something like that. Yeah. Right? Is it? What do you think?
My understanding is that it's like social pressure, but
okay.
I'll have to look into it again. I don't quite remember, but
maybe social pressure of health.
Right. Well, I mean, it could be. I mean, you never. But I was just asking just to kind of gauge this. But my real follow up now is like, what do you think is going to keep somebody vegan?
what's going to keep somebody vegan? Well, I mean, what's going to keep it's here. I'll give one answer that I hope it's not, and it would be being part of an in-group that you feel like I'm part of this club and everybody else is out, the same way like maybe Christians look at non-Christians is like, we're going to heaven, screw all you guys, where it probably wouldn't feel as cool if everybody was Christian. So it's possible it's that for some people, and I hope it's not. But if it is that for some people, those people suck, and we don't want those people to exist anyways. So I would say what the good right answer, which is hopefully for most vegans, is what's going to keep them vegan is because they are empathetic and they were able to get over their addiction. And so hopefully they would continue it.
So they're empathetic, and do you think that leads to them establishing veganism as a moral for themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. There's probably some wackadoodle vegans out there that not so much.
But do you think that's the kind of the reason why people, when they go vegan after they've gone vegan for enough time, that's what keeps them there? Do you think that would be true?
I think so, and I hope so. Is that the case with you?
Oh, certainly. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's kind of what my case is going to be on is that moral obligation and why it's important.
Before you go on, I haven't been reading comments, and I kind of feel bad, but I mean, we're doing a debate type thing where we just don't need to read comments. But I've been glancing at them, and I'm glad all you guys here are watching. I did want to read one though, if you're cool with that,
Go for it.
because I think I got misunderstood. I want to make sure that I'm at least not misunderstood by you. But Michaela Erickson said, corporations are not going to change because people talk about how animals should be treated. As long as they're being paid to do it, they're going to continue doing it. And I just want to make sure that it was understood that my want was that if more people, if vegans and meat eaters that are empathetic when it comes to animals all talk together, the conversations are what lead politicians to put something on their list of what they're going to take care of, and then hopefully if they want to get reelected, they try to follow through with those things, and that's how change is often made. And so anyways, I don't think that it's just magically going to happen based on conversation. I think that's just the way it would go. But yeah, anyways, go on.
And I had a couple more things on your case here. So I wanted to get your perspective on the optics to non-vegans who use the word vegan. Do you think that they would be confused by seeing somebody like who calls themselves vegan and then eats steak once a month?
Yeah, I think one good benefit would be it would lead to conversations where the person would like explain, like, you know, for me, I'm making sure I know where it comes from. It's grass fed. It's my neighboring farm. I've done my research and I feel like I need this for health. And they explain that, and then somebody else might show them a study that makes them rethink it, and hopefully if the study is right, which I think it is, and I've been fine, if the study is right, then that person will get won over. If they're not won over, then they're still doing 1,000 times better than they were before, and then better than most meat eaters. I guess I don't care about the confusion something could lead to, because it seems like the confusion mostly would lead to conversations. And I think the only way we're going to get the world to go vegan is if we continue to get study after study and health organization after health organization showing that you can be perfectly healthy on it. And if we can't prove that to others through studies and through them feeling good trying it out, then we're not going to win those people over anyways. So yeah.
So the whole point about asking whether or not it's confusing is because with your definition here, it seems like you're making some exceptions, and so I'm just kind of asking these things just to sort of test the definition itself. So
Okay,
so
yeah.
would steak be allowed to be sold at vegan festival events under your definition?
That's good. I'm glad we're having this conversation. I've thought about a lot of this to certain degrees. I have not thought to that degree. So no, similar to at a restaurant, the list of vegan things would be the list of whatever the standard what's usually defined by the Vegan Society as a strict vegan diet. Now, someday people might factor in something that a good friend of mine has vegan talked about this today, where it says like calories at a restaurant. Someday it might point out on all the plant-based stuff the amount of harm caused with like crop deaths and this and that and the other. And if you see like how much crop death there was to add a scoop of vegan ice cream to your brownie, maybe you'll leave that off. Whereas something that is like broccoli or apples or something, you'll go like, it's a bummer, but I need this for my health. So even though crop deaths is not factored in when people talk about vegan food, there's kind of a standard of the food you're getting does not have animal products in it. So if you have a vegan event, like a vegan camp out or something, then my guess would be it would be reasonable to say that these products here do not involve animals, even if some people that are vegan consume animals.
Okay. So what would you think if you were non-vegan and you're walking down the street and you see vegans protesting, for animal rights on one street corner, and then you keep walking and you see these other vegans with their own banner that they have steak.
They have steak.
Would you just not? Is this not confusing? Like, I mean, is it not like? Would not the optics of veganism stray from its moral position? Because don't you think
will always be confusing? How often do you go to a family event and people think you don't eat gluten because you're vegan?
Well, I haven't had that. No, there's definitely, when you tell people veganism, like they confuse it with vegetarianism, a lot of the time. But I think at some point vegans will outnumber vegetarians, and then they'll have that problem. We won't have that problem anymore.
Right. But yeah, no, I think there will be some confusion. But again, so far it seems like most of the confusion will lead to conversations, and the confusion will mostly be by the people that aren't vegan. So I mean, it's already the people that don't give a shit and that we haven't won over yet.